Hello, MECLA. It's Hudson Worsley here, Chair of MECLA, the Materials and Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance. We've got all of the MECLA Secretariat in the room as guests of Grimshaw Architects in Sydney, George Street, Sydney, which means we're on Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. And as always, recognise we're on Indigenous land and pay our respects to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Welcome. Welcome to you and welcome to everybody. This is a really exciting day. It's an exciting webinar that we're going to be holding, and also a fantastic example of collaboration. The tendrils of networks and previous colleagues that have come to this are remarkable, and I'm really chuffed that we're able to do this today. Next slide. So we're here to talk about the Minoro web platform. I won't steal Paul's thunder. You can mention that in a moment, Paul, but it comes about as a fantastic extension of what MECLA's been all about. And for new people dialing in, I'd just like to take you to the ecosystem diagram that is really the central piece of IP on which that justified and explained and helped us set up MECLA. And that is looking at a project life cycle, and then rather than only being linear, looking at all of the component parts that are needed to achieve the change to reduce embodied carbon in the construction sector, bringing us onto a Paris-aligned trajectory, which is what we're all about. So we have enablers, we have barriers, we have material flows, financial flows, and decisions. And recognising that it is complex and that there are many parties involved, this slide is fantastic. It shows the 190 plus organisations that are now part of the MECLA collaboration, part of our ecosystem. We started out, it was Monica Richter's concept, hey, let's have 40 members of this ecosystem around the Zoom. And now, 4 years on, we have 190. So have a look at the logos there. It's a fantastic broad brush that says we have suppliers, we have contractors, we have professional firms, including architects, we have local governments, state governments, we have NGOs, we have professional bodies. It's just a fantastic cross-section of our ecosystem. Now, to effect change, we have set up working groups, as many of you will know, across different parts of that ecosystem. So working on the demand side of things, understanding the tools and the data needed to evaluate embodied carbon. Working group 3-4, they come in for special mention today because they've been working on the knowledge side of things, on guidance, and it's their contributions, their output, their outputs coming to look at the guide, that guide on how to address embodied carbon across different stages of a project feed into what we're talking about today and the Minoro platform. Then we've got our material side, so the input parts of the value chain, and also our residential working group. So steel, concrete, aluminium, construction materials and assemblies, building services, engineered timber, hoping we've got people from all of those groups today, and recognising that none of us on our own can do this, but together we can. So that's the exciting part of MECLA. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Paul Toyne from Grimshaw Architects. Is that correct?
I'm going to hide back for a moment.
Alexi, forgive me.
No problem. So I'm going to talk just briefly. Sorry, I'll turn my camera on
And
here
I'll turn mine off
for a moment so that everyone can see my face up close. So before we turn over to Paul, I'm just going to quickly introduce one of the resources that we have fed into the Minoro platform, an Australian State-of-Play document that we launched this month through MECLA. As I said, it exists on their platform and is basically a sort of preliminary start for people to get their head around what's happening in embodied carbon in Australia right now. I'll just share my screen and show the document. I won't take more than 5 minutes to talk through this. But just to give everyone an idea of the resource. So the newest resource in the MECLA repertoire is the Australian State-of-Play, and this was done over the course of a few months at the back end of last year, at the beginning of this year. And it's very simple, so we'll go through it quite quickly, but essentially what it's there to do is give a very base level introduction to embodied carbon, some of the various state and federal policies and strategies that are being implemented around it, and different guidance documents that exist in Australia currently that can be leveraged to affect some of those outcomes. It's nowhere near as comprehensive as Minoro, as you're all going to see very shortly, but for someone who's just being introduced to embodied carbon, it gives a good platform to understand where Australia is currently at with regards to this particular decarbonization journey and challenge. The way that the resource is laid out is as two maps. The first is on the strategy side. So here you can see a couple of the key strategies at various government levels and understand how they play into that embodied carbon conversation and where maybe your respective governments are in taking action within this particular space. After each map, there are links provided to each of those resources. So anyone that wants to do a little bit more of a deep dive and understand really the nuances of each of those can follow those links and learn more about them. The second map here gives measurements, programs, policies, and various guidance tools, including some of those MECLA resources, different state and national guidance schemes and programs. So you can see here a lot of those that I'm sure many of you are well familiar with, including Neighbours, Green Star, ISK rating scheme, the Low Carbon Materials Hub, the GBCA's Practical Guide to Upfront Carbon, among a whole plethora of other resources. And similarly, in this context, you have those different links, a brief description of what they are and their relevance to embodied carbon in Australia, and then a way of navigating out to go and access them in further detail. If there's anything missing from this document that you know of that you think ought to be included, we do want to hear. We will keep it as a live document and update it periodically. We know this space is a constantly evolving one, so no need to keep it frozen in the early period of 2025. So please do shout out if something comes to mind. But otherwise, that's our resource. And now I'll hand over to Hudson to do an introduction to Paul, and we can talk Minoro.
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name's Paul Toyne. I'm the Group Sustainability Practice Leader for Grimshaw, an architect and urban design practice with studios here in Sydney, Melbourne, and also in Auckland, across into other parts of the world. So what I would like to do today is really just give you a quick introduction to Minoro, what it is, the origins of it, and how hopefully it can be useful in your work, and then pass over to Kathy to really highlight a practical demonstration with regards to MECLA information. So hopefully you can see my screen. All good, wonderful. So what is Minoro? Minoro is an online platform for the built environment that does centralize the latest guidance, methodologies, and advice on carbon management. How I like to describe it is it's what you need to do, tells you what to do, tells you when to do it, tells you who needs to do it, and whom you do it with. And even better than that, it actually then helps you with the governance of the carbon management process. So you can put it all in a carbon management plan, and at each of your work stages, you can evaluate how you're getting on against your targets for whole life carbon. Couple of important points to note is it's open source. So it's free to use. You don't even need to register, although if you do, it'd be really grateful. There's also a feedback button. So when you're going through Minoro and you see new publications or if you have any comments, we'd be delighted to receive them. It is a live web platform, so it's growing. And let me just describe it to you, at least the origins first. And so if I can describe myself very briefly, I have worked as a contractor. So I used to work for Lendlease back in the UK. I've worked as a design engineer with WSP. I've worked on civil engineering projects with Balfour Beatty. I've worked with utility and asset managers, as well as product manufacturers, for example, around the world. And when you're looking at how you reduce whole life carbon, isn't it complicated? Isn't it confusing? Where do you start? Where do you go for that information? So what Minoro was trying to do is, given the climate emergency, where can you go to source good, reliable, credible, independently reviewed, free material that gives you the best opportunity to reduce whole life carbon? So the purpose behind Minoro, when I started with Grimshaw, was that we made a commitment to net zero carbon ready designs by the end of 2025. So I asked our business, how are we going to do it? And we have examples of achieving it, but we didn't actually have the documentation. So could we then actually understand what agency the design architects have, and could you then expand it to cover the whole project lifecycle? So very briefly, just to give you the origins, we quickly realised there's about 7 key themes on how you would create a decarbonisation pathway. And here's some examples of some projects that we trialled these principles and actions on and got some really great results. 150 Lonsdale Street is our proud new studio in Melbourne. It's a fit out, but through using the principles of Minoro, we reduced whole life carbon by 56% against the baseline, by way of example. Let's just move on very quickly. Some of you will know another project of ours, Older Fleet on Collins Street, again back in Melbourne. But just to delve a little bit more into the detail here, it's the high-level activities leading to the outcomes that we're really interested in. So it just gives you an example here of some of the whole life carbon savings that we had. So 49% energy use reduction, upfront carbon savings, 39% improvement against a baseline. So the point is, we knew that we had created a set of principles and pathways that, if utilised, would work. So what I then did was I then started to talk to people and said, has anyone else thought about the landscape, the kind of holistic view that we need to take to reduce whole life carbon? So I spoke with the Australian Institute of Architects and with the Green Building Council Australia. I also spoke with WWF Australia and MECLA, but I went around the world, so to the Americans, to what's happening in Europe. And pretty soon what I was told was that no one has a pathway like this, and that would be a really good idea if we could actually publish something so that we could all benefit. But to do that, it would be good to involve a whole array of different businesses and organisations. So I embarked upon a series of workshops for buildings and infrastructure that went across to North America, into Australia, and some of you on the call may remember being part of that. And this was in the period late end of 2020, 2021. Of course, we're all suffering from the impacts of COVID. So we're doing all these calls remotely, but it was amazing to see this contribution. And what happened as a result of that is a tool or a platform that was developed from a design and architecture perspective became something that actually was really important for investors, clients or asset managers all the way through the whole project lifecycle. So, for example, I went to spoke with the World Bank and the IFC and the powers around green financing and how you can attract green financing if you have the right kind of carbon commitments, for example. Anyhow, so this has gone through a fairly extensive peer review process, and it's now wider, as I said, than just architecture and design. So what is it? So I'm just going to show slides. I think Kathy's going to go live into Minoro, but it works through each of the project life cycle stages, from 0 through to 7. You can change the region in which you're operating. So we've got one for North America, Canada, we've got one specifically for Australia. But it can also work globally. So there is, as I'm describing here. You can then also say, well, I am a particular stakeholder. What is my opportunity to influence whole life carbon reduction? And here you have in blue, you can see this particular stakeholder highlighted, and you can see the 71 actions. Of those actions that are relevant to you, where you have some form of accountability, you're highlighted. Similarly, you can, I beg your pardon, you can also go into the different themes that I described, those 7 themes, and I'll show you that in one moment. So this is the front page. You then launch Minoro. So you then go into that page I showed you. You can view this on a tablet. It works on your iPhone or any phone, sorry, Android phone, as well as on a computer screen. So you can use it for workshops. So you can choose you select your region. So this is Australia. What typically happens is just the work stages change because the headings and the language around the work stages varies depending on where you are. Also to say there is a user guide, and I mentioned the feedback loop at the button at the top, and I'll talk to you about the toolkit in one moment. So here you are, you're a structural engineer, what's your influence, what would you do in your part of the project? So you can assign yourself and understand what your accountabilities might be. Similarly, if you're looking very relevant for MECLA at embodied carbon, here's where under the different stages, some key decisions and opportunities are there, which are all about reducing the embodied carbon through your project, all the way right from the beginning about challenging the project. Do you have an existing building that you can repurpose or adapt? Do you have to demolish it? Can you actually maybe disassemble it? And those construction products can still be reused and recycled, maybe not in your project. But all the way through to then starting to identify targets and then going through your embodied carbon modelling. So what happens if you were to click on one of the 71 actions? This comes up. So on the right-hand side, what you get is information on what is the subject, what is that action, why is that action important, who typically leads it, with support from whom, and then you go even further down into the how. And when you go into the how, you get global resources. And I picked on this one in particular because it just demonstrates how some of the MECLA publications have been put into the system. I'm sure that will be expanded upon a little bit later. But this then, if you click on one of those URLs, it goes to the specific place within that documentation that's relevant to fulfilling that action. Rather than the beginning of an 80-page document, you're left floundering, thinking, well, where was the relevance of that and how do I find it? So we've been really meticulous in trying to identify and help you get closer to the source of truth, if you like. So again, looking at setting up an embodied carbon model, upfront carbon, really critical for your projects here in Australia. Again, linking it into the guidance advice that you might find in neighbours. And then supporting it with further guidance from the regional or indeed national information that's available. Now, just to summarise, because you can all go on Minoro now and you can have a play, and it's pretty intuitive. I guess the beauty of it all is it puts it all in one place in a really simple way to understand. And we launched it in July of this year. And subsequently, we've got over 5,000 users from 83 countries. We've got fabulous support, and we know we've got the Green Building Council of Australia and AIA behind us because they've been part of that whole process. If you find some improvements that can be made on Minoro, we'd be very happy to receive it. We'd even give you an acknowledgement, you as an individual or you as your business. It's very open and inclusive. If after looking at this, you'd like to become a supporter, and we have some Australian businesses that are supporters, please do get in touch as well. By being a supporter, you're not making a financial donation, by the way. We have financing. It's come from the World Green Building Council and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And that means that we can also help support the revisions and improvements to Minoro. So this wants to become, it is live and it will be improved upon. So what are the key benefits? What are your takeaways? Well, I mentioned the toolkit. If you go and download the toolkit, you will find that you can get a carbon management plan, that you can get an opportunities tracker. So it's a classic thing that you would do to look at the opportunities and the feasibility of taking whole life carbon action, understanding the impact on capital costs, on your program, the carbon saving, etc. But it does also allow you to make that connection between policy that's happening across state and federal level. And really, as I see it, it maximizes your opportunity to reduce whole life carbon at all project stages. Talk about its application. So this is COP29 in Baku in Azerbaijan. Baku White City, which is a 1,600 hectare redevelopment or regeneration project, actually applied the principles of Minoro across its master plan and some of its buildings to understand what climate action they could take. So you can retrospectively look at Minoro and apply those principles. So that's been wonderful. Kathy's going to talk about the guidance, but just in the last couple of weeks, we've added an additional 83 resources onto the Minoro portal for you. We're constantly checking in with neighbours because they've also provided their data and others. So it is the place to go to get the most up-to-date, latest information. And that's me. So do get in touch and please join the Minoro fan club. And looking forward to hearing now from Kathy. Thank you very much.
Hi. Yes, so MECLA has joined the fan club. As you probably all know, we, or the working group 3 and 4, has been spending a lot of time over the last 4 years working on a way to bring all the materials together. They have not only started collecting a lot of materials, they had thought about this plan of bringing it all together in one form. The format was called the MECLA Action Guide, and we had actually been talking about it quite a bit. But then we did come across Minoro, and we did realize that we wouldn't be able to pull it off just this well. And if this platform was there, why not actually contribute to that? And that's what we did. So we fed our materials in there, and as Paul has mentioned, from over 170 documents that we had in our action guide, over 80 went into Minoro. So what I'll do quickly is start sharing my screen now. Oh, is it sharing now? No, is it sharing? There we go. All right, so I know that you are likely all typing away and exploring, but I will just talk you through a few things, what it will look like when you get onto the website if you haven't got access to it. So as Paul said, you launch Minoro on the website, you can subscribe, get some information, and then you're in. And in the top, at the top, you can check the regions, you can go to global, or we'll just go to Australia since that's where we are. You see the different stages walking across here, and at the bottom you have the different stakeholders. So what I'll do is I will move into the, and this is what it looks like. When you move across, you see the different ones lighting up. So in the leadership one, you see this. If you move to procurement, it moves across. So it highlights the relevant stages and actions for you. So we'll quickly move into this one because I do want to show you where we can find Alexi's state-of-play. So the established policy and legislative drivers, you see the global guidance, the what and the why and the who, support and the how, as Paul had talked about. And then you see some global resources, some policies that are in development, and then you come to Australia where you see a whole range of materials until you get to the further down even. Future policies? No. Where do we see it, Alexa? Here it is.
Future policy.
Here we go. State of play. And then you click through and you can see it on the MECLA website. All right, so it clicks you straight through, it opens a new window, wonderful, you can go back, you can have them all open while you're exploring different ones. Were there any other ones I wanted to show you here? There's a future one. And then also maybe you can look at this, the embodied carbon reduction pledge policy that we had previously published. And this might be, for example, quite interesting if you then look on the MECLA website, see, because we do have additional resources on the website. So if you look into presentations, you will, for example, find a presentation on this guide there, down here. And it was actually David Ritter from Grimshaw who presented that. So double bonus here. So another one that is really interesting that I want to show you is procurement, because when I started working on MECLA, I was also, it's about demand and it's about procurement, and procurement needs to know all these things. They have all these questions. How do we ask for things? Who do we ask? How do we go about it? So let's have a look at this. I was looking at this earlier on a larger screen. So here, engaging the supply chain. That was the question that we got a lot. People asked us, how do we engage the supply chain? What are the questions we need to ask? And that really led MECLA to develop a range of materials. And one of the ones I really wanted to show you here is the low carbon concrete guide, along with others. Before I show you that, I show you some other really interesting ones that are in here that we've had conversations about. You have, for example, the embodied carbon toolkit. That's the embodied carbon curriculum by the Australian Institute for Architecture. They presented at one of the MECLA design events, which we had on designing out carbon. You can find that on our website, and you'll find this with other of these materials that you see everywhere as well. So if you look at the guide to carbon, you can find it here. Again, there is going to be an update on this, which is going to be really exciting, because the working group developed these classification schemes here for all of Australia, and the update that will be coming out in the next month will have way more EPDs. They've added over 4,000 additional EPDs from Australia and New Zealand, and they're now confident they can break these classification schemes up by state. So this is going to be really exciting. What these materials can do, and what this material in particular did, is it was really received super well. The ACT government reached out to us following this and said, like, oh, can we use that guide as the starting point for our low carbon concrete policy? And late last year, we heard from the Victorian Infrastructure Development Authority, and they actually referenced this specification scheme in their lower carbon material visual guide, explicitly referencing MECLA in here. So that's really fantastic for all of us to see. All right, the last one that I wanted to show you is in the measure and manage. And just in case you hadn't noticed, at the top, you can switch between this thing with the panel and the whole overview. And if you look at the different stages here, I wanted to take you to the stage 8, the end of life stage, and show you some of the materials there. So having talked about, we increasingly talk about, we don't need to build new, we need to reuse, recycle, or repurpose. So this has become increasingly interesting, and there are so many things in there that we need to look at, and that we have actually talked about in the past. So in Australia, you can find, for example, the How to Write a Building Disassembly Plan, which was also part of that Designing Out Carbon MECLA Spotlight event that we had, and some of the latest release materials, specification guides on different materials. So here we have concrete masonry and roof tiles. And as you can see in here, they actually reference reusability and recyclability in here. So this is how it picks this up. So interestingly, or what I find really useful about this text beforehand is that it actually refers you back to where else you find materials related to this stage. And you can see here, this one in stage 8 actually relates back to stage 0. So it relates back to the very beginning of everything. All right, I think that's it from me. If anyone has any questions, or do I go, I'll get back to you.
Sure. So we've been getting a terrific active flow of questions and Paul multitasking, answering quite a few as we go. But I'm keen to flesh some of them out and to repeat some for the broader audience who might just be listening rather than following the Q&A. Key message, this is a free service available to anybody who would like to participate, to learn, to use the information.
Correct, yeah, it's free, it's open source. It's an inclusive process that we've gone through. Let's just remember, you know, we've got a global issue here. So how can we engage with projects and project teams working in, I don't know, countries like Ethiopia or Vietnam? So we don't want to put up any barriers for people to actually be able to access this information. That's why there is the global section. And so, yeah, it's free to use. You don't even have to register. But if you do register, it would be great because it'd be nice to know who's using it for the impact that we're making. By way of example, I spoke to, and I think Mace actually operates here, the construction management company. So Mace have integrated Minoro into their carbon management process. They actually used the carbon management plan, downloaded it and improved upon it slightly, I guess, for a project in Ireland. So, you know, the materials that are on here are designed by practitioners so they can easily use and implement it. So it's important. So, you know, it's fantastic that businesses are using it in that way. We'd like to know the impact because that's how we get the funding. The funding is only for the update and maintenance of Minoro. But to answer another question that came in, we slightly cheated here by including, if you scroll down the regions, we include PAS 2080 UK. And some of you will know that PAS 2080 is a publicly acceptable standard. That's what the PAS stands for. And it's for the management measurement of infrastructure and buildings, carbon within them. I was actually part of their technical advisory panel for the two publications back in 2013 and now subsequently. And so the idea and what we should be exploring is to have a specific infrastructure pathway, because I think there's a point that came in that, you know, is there information on roads? Is there information on railways and various other things? And the answer would probably be no, there isn't. But the next iteration would be really exciting to see if we could get some funding together to do a infrastructure specific Minoro pathway for Australia and then build that out for other regions. So that's if anyone's interested in that, then please contact me. And whilst I'm here in Sydney, I'm hopefully be having some conversations around that topic.
Fantastic. Well, we know that there is a lot of infrastructure being built in Australia, particularly linear infrastructure. So I think the Infrastructure Sustainability Council, Infrastructure New South Wales maybe, and certainly Infrastructure Australia, all bodies that would be good stakeholders in that conversation. Tell me, if I'm working on a project and I've cracked a nut, I've got some new finding or a new material that's just working, do I have to wait for you to update, or can I say, hey, Paul, got a really good one, can you update, can we upload this, share the knowledge?
Yes, so there is a feedback form on Minoro. The most important thing about any information that you find on Minoro is it has to be credible. It needs to be, you know, have some degree of independent review. It can't be, I work for company X, we think we've got a really great answer, come and buy my product, please can you put it up there? So it's not a place to advertise. There are one or two examples on Minoro where we do actually talk about a tool or tools that have been published, which are open source by certain different businesses. And we've done that through quite a rigorous peer review process and a little committee that will decide. So, but to your point, Hudson, if you've come across something that's new, it's open source, so it's free, it's credible, and you think it's got a rightful place in Minoro, we'd love to hear from you. So it's not quite like Wikipedia where you can self-edit. There will always be the need for some scrutiny because that protects the integrity of Minoro. Yeah, so we need to make sure that the standard is maintained.
Fantastic. We've got a question that's come in asking where do suppliers and manufacturers sit in the tool?
They are there, but I think there's a couple of things where I'd really love your contributions, where I think actually Minoro could probably be strengthened. I think for those of you, particularly in the manufacturing sector, when you look at the procurement section, you then go into construction and then the operation and maintenance, depending on what type of supplier you are. I think that there's areas there where it'd be really interesting to see under different procurement strategies how the actions may or may not be applicable. So we did quite a lot of work, which is really at the front end. So investors, clients, architects, design engineers, all the consultants, in particular the structural engineers, and then through into contractors. But it would be really helpful to have a play with it. And if you're from that particular sector and you can see ways of improving it, please send your ideas, because this is, as I mentioned before, don't look at this and think, wow, it's fantastic. Look at it and say, it's really helpful. I want to use it, but I know I can improve it.
Sounds good. Sounds very much around the ethos of MECLA, so I can see how this has come about. Tell me, what does the governance look like? You've said it has materials have to be impartial, there has to be rigor, and you've got some funding from World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the World Green Business Council.
Yeah.
But is that funding a small project group to keep an eye on things, or is there what's the process? What's the governance look like so people do have trust in it? Yeah.
So Grimshaw have put a lot of pro bono support into getting this up and running. We have an annual cost to run the website, to pay for its name, etc. The fees or the funds that we get from those two organisations touch upon that. If we wanted to go further and do the infrastructure, we would need to do some more funding. We need to go out and see what we could do with that. But we've got sufficient funding to keep it going and to do the updates. The updates are done by an analyst who's in my team under my direction, and the governance is that the bodies that are helping to fund together with us, they would ask me first to say, is this credible? And I would put it forward, and then we get to submit that information. And through our networks, and you can see the supporters that we had, or even the different groups, we can easily go back to Australian professional bodies and check, whether it's with Davina and Hawaii at the Green Building Council in Australia, or whether it's with AIA and their various committees. So there is, it's worked so far. I mean, we don't want to create some kind of bureaucracy, and be, heavily tied down by committees. We want this to be agile as well. So, we've worked with MECLA in the last less than 3 months to get this together. Sonara, my analyst, has done a lovely job putting all the information. She did that, 73 publications. Was it 73? I think it was 83. In about a week,
Wow.
So we committed that time to doing that, and we don't, this isn't set up to make money. So someone asked about subscription. No subscriptions. I want it to be free at the point of entry.
Fantastic. Nimble and lean. I like the sound of that. But it means whoever's involved is working pretty hard, I think.
Yeah, but listen, when you've been involved like I have in the property sector, and we're all working really hard to try and minimise our whole life carbon. I don't mind doing this as long as I know people think it's useful and they're using it. So again, to that point, those of you looking at it the first time, do go and experiment with it. And those of you who did see the different releases and launches of Minoro, it would be great to get some feedback. And if you are using it, what did you do and what difference did it make? That would be really helpful. Ideally, this should drive efficiencies in terms of our own time management, going to one place to finding the most relevant information, as long as you can believe that it's credible, to that point that I've made earlier.
Yeah.
So hopefully this is going to be something that's going to enable you to work more effectively. And the other thing that's really important about Minoro is it brings people together, project teams together. And that integration means that when you are trying to tackle whole life carbon reductions, you need to really understand, how the project team does fit together. And quite often we get so much fragmentation. But if you have a process, a carbon management plan that gets updated at every end of every work stage, and to answer another question, it's not just the REBA work stages. That's why Kati was describing that when you pull down the menu, the work stages do change. But when you do get to an understanding of how one work stage flows into the other, and you see some of the actions in Minoro are replicated, they're the same actions. Go back and revise your operational energy model, for example. And at the end of every work stage, you do revise and update the carbon management plan. All of that leads to good governance. It leads to openness and accountability around driving carbon out of your design and your construction, and then in your operation and maintenance. So it's the feedback that we've got is it brings project teams together.
So that's answering the question from Simon McCarthy. Other design stages fixed to the REBA work plan. That's really it, isn't it? Yes, and more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great.
And then Rachel Stewart, WSP have been a supporter. They've also been involved in the consultations, as have other Australian businesses like Mirvac, for example. I'm not going to give a name check to everybody. I'm just, but it's important for you in the audience to feel that there has been this consultation and involvement from your industry. It probably hasn't been perfect because, there's hundreds of people to consult with, but it has got to a really good stage where hopefully you can look at it now and say, this is fit for purpose. I may have a few things in which could lead to improvements. And again, bring it on, come and contact us.
And how do they contact you?
Again, on the website,
Yep.
there's a feedback form.
Great.
And then you can post your comments, good, bad and ugly. I won't be offended. It's not a problem.
No ego in editing. It's not personal. It's for the greater good. Hey, Tommy, how do we promote this? Clearly, as you said, stakeholder engagement is broad but can never be perfect. Promoting this also broad. The MECLA is an organic network that has grown and grown. What can we do to support this and spread the word?
Well, I don't know what your communication plans are for this, but if you're members of MECLA and you're listening into this, it would be great to think that we could do something regionally in your area. You don't need me to do this. You can see how intuitive Minoro is, to explain. If you want any support with any of the slides, I've got a colleague based in Melbourne, Dave Ritter, who will be very happy to help. We've talked to other organisations about promoting this, but yeah, it's all about sharing the platform, letting people know it exists, using it, and then finding out what the benefits of using it are. And then if it is good, I think it will grow organically. We've got a commitment to reach out into the global south. As I mentioned, we presented at the COP29. We're having conversations to get Minoro in places where it really will make a huge difference. In Australia, there's lots to go for, particularly around infrastructure, as you mentioned. You've got some good guidance with Green Star and Neighbours and various other things, particularly from the MECLA family. We need to make sure that Minoro is widely distributed. If you think it's a good thing.
Terrific. A question from me, not from the chat. Often from my project experience and also MECLA experience, I've seen that a lot of the problem and the solution is technical, but equally some of it is also change management. How does Minoro tackle the soft side or the non-technical part of change?
I think it goes back to the behaviours piece, and actually having clear sight of what the project is trying to achieve. So if you go right at the beginning, a client's taking some advice, wants to do the right thing, wants to drive whole life carbon down, may or may not have all that knowledge and understanding. What Minoro actually allows the client to do is say, well, okay, let me have a quick read of Minoro. Okay, so I've downloaded, you can download a Minoro action tracker, 71 actions, and it gives you the responsibility, accountabilities, the supporters, a whole action plan. And if I was a client, I'd be saying, okay, so if I get my project team to follow this, that's going to maximise my opportunity to reduce whole life carbon. That's one of my goals. So I ought to be just be saying, I want you, all in my project team, whoever I'm appointing, to understand this and demonstrate to me periodically at the right time how you're achieving this. And then I want to hold you to account. And I understand that you're going to be asking me questions around whether I can afford to do certain activities. And they may come within my budget, and they may be outside my budget. But at least I'd like to know first and foremost. And I can understand the implications to my business as a result of it. If you then have that kind of leadership driven with the right kind of finance and then the due diligence, everybody's mind is then focused, concentrated. Carbon isn't the only issue. There's a number of issues that we all need to be aware of, yeah, for sure. Design quality, program, everything else. But it's important that carbon is part of that discussion. And so what Minoro does, it forces the behaviours for everyone to work in an integrated way. So I'll give you an example. About 3 years ago, we were using Minoro, and we were doing a repurposing of a factory in the Bosphorus, so in Istanbul. And it was going to be for a state-of-the-art museum. It's a quite technical project. Structural engineering is really good, but they came up with their format and their design. And we said, well, this is really quite carbon heavy. Can we not approach it in a different way? And because we asked that question, they then explored it. They changed the way they spanned the structural support for the building, so some retained facades, etc., and saved 20% of embodied carbon. Not only did they save 20% of embodied carbon because of reduced steelworks, they also saved quite a bit of money. Yeah. So when you look at in the world of infrastructure, if you can save carbon, you generally save money. Slightly different in buildings, but it can still be achieved, but it depends. But I use that as an example. Once there's more agency and more information available, and Minoro prides that, it gives the different actors, if you like, some agency to start asking questions. They can refer back and say, well, the guidance says you should be doing this. Have you done it? If not, why haven't you done it? And you can do it in a way that's not, you're not like the police force, but you're actually creating a common goal together. How can we bring the carbon down in our project? And so that's what it changes in my view. It changes the behaviours, it changes the positioning of carbon, its status in the project.
So do you think we've heard several people talk about time, cost, quality, and the need to add carbon as success metrics for a project, and that's very much what you're talking about. A segue to another question. Standard clauses so that the carbon performance becomes part of the success for the architect, for the contractor, for the supplier. Are there contractual clauses in there in the toolkit, or would that be work?
So I think that's one area around the procurement, because we used a kind of like design and build model, which is not necessary. It's one of the most common forms of contracting, but it's not the only one. So I think there are some examples. And there's also some examples of that, the policy situation, so the regulation and understanding where that comes into play. So, for example, back where I live in London, the Greater London Authority have got a requirement for contractors to demonstrate of projects of a certain size, what are they doing around embodied carbon? And we've got, we've got the REBA climate emergency targets, as well as the LETI stuff, and that's all in there. And one of the things that feedback I got back from people working in different regions is that it's actually quite useful to know what others are doing and to see if what you're doing could be seen as best practice, or whether actually you should be learning from others and seeing if you can push the bar even higher. So there are some examples of contractual arrangements. But again, if there's some that we haven't included, which I'm probably sure there would be, it would be great to see. And there was this idea of building out some case studies so that you could go directly into what a good project would look like. I think that's something that we'd like to explore. We wanted, first of all, when we launch this, we need to work out whether people still want it. And then if they still want it, then we will continue to think about ways to innovate and improve it. So comments and ideas like you're giving me about a search function, etc. Anthony, thank you. Yes, we might consider it. We need to work out how you do it and what the and when to do it. So it's those kind of that kind of feedback is really useful to us. If we can demonstrate there's a need from it from an industry group such as this one, then we can take that back to others or to funders to say, look, if we were to do this, this would be the impact, and that's what would be interesting. Because at the end of the day, we can't judge this because we're not asking you to provide your own information. It's not going to be a library for this is our carbon management plan. Please, we're not. It's not a live, I guess, performance table, if you like. That's your own information. You can download everything for free from Minoro and use it within your business. But demonstrating outcomes, which is the thing that really matters, isn't it? How much carbon are we actually avoiding? That's what's hard to prove. And the success of Minoro will continue if we get those stories coming back to us.
Right on the point. CJ Wilson's just asked, will there be a way to upload case studies?
Oh, CJ, I saw you at the Climate Action Week in Sydney. Nice. Should I call you bro? I think that's what you do. But anyhow, no, CJ gave a very good presentation. At the moment, there's no way to upload a case study because we haven't built that functionality. Why haven't we? Well, we knew we wanted it, but again, if there is a demand, then we can help supply it. But it would be really, let us know. And again, then you see, we then have to have some kind of criteria.
Yeah.
So, where would the case studies come from? How do we make sure they're the best of the best, and they're distributed around the different regions so we can learn from one another.
The MECLA experience has very much been that a case study can be very helpful in myth busting or demonstrating to someone more conservative than the innovator might be to say, hey, look, it has been done elsewhere. These were the benefits. This is what they've overcome. So, I really support the idea of
we'd be open to that. There was we had a whole wish list of things we wanted to do. The most important thing is to get it out there and for all of you to say, this is good, but we'd like following, and then we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. All right. CJ, you've set the ball rolling. Good one. James Stewart is asking us if biochar as a construction additive might be included in the tool. That's getting very specific.
It is, yeah. So what we would do there, you would then go into the guidance that tells you around supplementary cementitious material, what might be available, where you would go for that information, because it does vary, so whether it's natural pozzolana, biochar, whatever it could be. So again, if there's something that's missing, there's a guide or some kind of documentation that could be included, then again, please, some of you are, far more experts than I am going into your specialist subject. So have a good look at Minoro, and if you find things that are missing, then please share with us and we'll see what we can do.
Paul, a broader question. How have you avoided carbon blinkers? When MECLA started out, several people said, what about biodiversity? What about water? What about all very valid, but in your case, how have you made sure that circularity and impact on nature aren't ignored and that there's a embodied carbon, whole of life carbon, but within the broader picture? How have you addressed that?
So I think it's really clear to state that you could build Minoro out and have pathways that deal now with climate resilience, that could deal with health and well-being, that could deal with biodiversity, etc. Because what we've done is created almost like a mind map for a single purpose, a sole focus. So I make no apologies for stating this. This is specifically to maximise the use of reducing whole life carbon.
Yeah.
That's what it does, right? That's not to say that the principles of circularity are ignored. They're not. In fact, if you have a look right at the beginning and at the end of the documentation, we make it very clear. And again, when you're looking at selecting construction materials, that again is made very clear. What it doesn't do, though, it doesn't go off and tries to provide information and guidance around nature. I know nature is an important issue and biodiversity conservation is. And the reason why it doesn't do that is because we would then be at a stage where we're creating something, to use, I think, an Australian expression, something greater than Ben-Hur. I think that's an Australian expression. But anyhow, the production costs, we would never get Minoro out there. Yeah,
Yeah.
and by the time we've incorporated and integrated all these different things, we'd be in a far worse situation around trying to reduce whole life carbon. So unashamedly, I'm an ecologist. I worked 6 years at WWF. That's how the whole thing with WWF Australia and MECLA came together when I was out here on a visit talking about Minoro. And Minoro was in its infancy. So I make no excuses about it being focused on that. We could create a Minoro for all these other ones and then you demonstrate those linkages. Wouldn't that be lovely? I'd love to do that. So, I've gone for, let's get something out there, let's get it used, let's save the carbon now. And the point I make, and I know I could be criticised for this, but if we don't solve the climate emergency, we're not really going to have much biodiversity left anyhow. So, in terms of priorities, nature is important, ecosystem services, yes. But let's get the carbon out. We know we can do it. We've got the technology. We've got things like Minoro. We've got the guidance. We just need the right leadership and execution. So let's tackle this now.
At the global level, I was very interested before we were talking, you mentioned the global south. How do you engage the developing countries and have carbon as a priority when Maslow's hierarchy of needs may be focusing on lower order issues? How do you raise carbon to be a common?
So the good news here is the relationship we have with the Green Building Councils. So the Green Building Council network are working on the carbon issue in all their jurisdictions, if you like. So there is a Green Building Council movement, as you're probably well aware, that is in the Global South, and how we're now looking to see how we can support and build capacity for those particular Green Building Councils. Now, it may be that there is information available at a national level. Some of it may be from the private sector, from academia, some of it may be policy level. But again, having that consolidated in one place could be really useful for them. And so that's our route in. Okay, so it's the Green Building Councils, they evaluate Minoro. This will be fantastic. We can use it. We can see our membership wanting it. We can create a change that way. The whole political society issue, Minoro doesn't necessarily deal with that.
Yeah.
But you only have to look at the implications that we've had, in Brisbane or wherever else in terms of natural disasters caused by increased extreme weather events. And that again demonstrates the need to do two things. One, to decarbonise wherever possible, as quickly as possible, and also build resilience. So we need to do those two things. So this is all about cutting your carbon.
Fantastic. I'm really conscious of time. We've got 1 minute to go. What's the final call to action for we call MECLA a do tank. We're about doing. We're not just about research and talking. It's about doing. What's the action? What's the do that you would like MECLA members and participants today? What's your call for us?
Well, I mean, the questions I've got been asked and the whole way this has been set up, it's been fantastic. So there's a high level of engagement. So what it's about now is about actual implementation. Review Minoro. If you think it's got a role within your organisation or you want to promote it back to your clients or whatever, just get out and use it and give us some feedback. And hopefully together we can all be successful in reducing whole life carbon.
Fantastic. Paul, thank you very much. Thank you to you. Thank you to Grimshaw and the Minoro project. I'm so excited that MECLA could make a material contribution to that and call on our membership. Let's use it. Let's feed back. Let's help improve it and spread the word. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to Alexi, Carty, Monica as well, out of camera shot, and to Paul, thank you very much for a terrific information session.
Thank you.